The former Secretary of State of the United States on our Newsmaker line. Welcome back, Secretary Mike Pompeo. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, Simon. I hope you're doing well also.
Doing great. Thank you very much. I've been looking forward to getting your voice on all of this stuff. Because there is so much going on. I just mentioned Ukraine. We get to talk to Ukraine every day at the start of my show live. There's actually an Iowa farmer who also farms out in Ukraine. He talks to us every single day and gives us updates from what is taking place on the ground. Was this avoidable completely?
Look, if America fails to lead, if we have communicated to the world that we're not going to be leading, that we're not prepared to defend the things that matter to us most, the bad guys take notice of this. That goes back as far as when President Obama refused to defend the red line when he said, if Bashar Assad uses chemical weapons in Syria, we'll do something. He didn't. Putin knows that. He's now got a major space in Syria. We often forget this. There were a long list of demonstrations of weakness, and Vladimir Putin has driven a truck through them, and much of this now redounds to the awful tragedy that's taking place to the Ukrainian people.
So what can we do? I mean, I've heard calls for a Polish MiGs, for example, was saying no to that. I've heard calls for a no-fly zone, and we're saying no to that. So we're basically letting these people, because Vladimir Putin's targets include women and kids and a maternity hospital, for goodness sake, which, they're not saying, oh, sorry, we made a mistake. No, they're saying, no, that was a legitimate military target. So we're just going to let him get slaughtered?
So actually, I saw that comment from Foreign Minister Lavrov today. I spent a lot of time with him, as you can imagine, during my time as Secretary of State. He was a liar then. He continues to spread mistruth and misinformation. He is a lapdog for Vladimir Putin in that respect. So to hear him say this was a military target, show us the pictures, right? The truth is, it's pretty clear that these folks are attacking innocent civilians wantonly across the country. And so whatever he said today, you should take with a massive grain of salt. Second, as for things we can do, the Ukrainians have demonstrated their willingness to defend themselves. They're putting their lives on the line. We ought to provide them with all the tools and assistance that we can to help them do that. So whether that is MiGs from NATO, from used equipment, or more American Javelin missiles, or importantly, real-time intelligence from the United States. Simon, I was CIA director. I can tell you we have some of the greatest capabilities in the world to help them understand where Russians are moving, and importantly, perhaps what they're saying is something that might well be possible for us to achieve. We ought to be doing that. I suspect that we are not. We ought to be doing everything we can because Vladimir Putin aggressively invaded another nation, and the West can't tolerate this. We somehow seem to have forgotten the lessons of how we destroyed the Soviet Union. The model of peace through strength worked. And when you're on your back foot, when you're as weak as this administration has been, not only is Putin watching, so is the Ayatollah, so is Chairman Kim, so is Xi Jinping.
So I feel so bad for these people. I talk to them literally every day. We have this unique resource that we get to speak to on the air every single day since the invasion began, and it's just awful what's happening out there. It really is awful. And I'm a Jew from Europe with very little family, Mr. Secretary, and it's like we say all the time. We say never again, and all right, there are no concentration camps, but Vladimir Putin launched a World War II style invasion. That's what he's done. We have massive refugee situations now.
Yes, the refugee situation is likely to increase. I've heard a little bit of what you've been talking about on your station. I have some good friends there too, including a fellow who's the priest at the military hospital in Kyiv. He's the senior chaplain there, essentially. He's a member of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, someone that I've become very close to. He writes this nearly every day from the front lines. I wrote a little story about this in the New York Post, talking about him and his bravery and the bravery of those around him. The situation is awful. It didn't have to be this way. NATO has the capability to push back on Vladimir Putin in a serious way, which will begin to impose real costs not only on him, but on the decision makers that assist him around him, as well as on the Russian people. All of this is to convince him that this is not worth the candle. And, I've gotten asked, Simon, much as you asked me at the beginning, would this have happened if you all were still there? President Trump and you were still there. I can't prove it because it didn't happen, but I can say this much. Vladimir Putin hasn't changed since I've known him. I met him a number of times. He hasn't changed. What changed was American resolve and the belief in the mind of Vladimir Putin that the United States would be serious in protecting things that matter to it. He clearly doesn't respect that, and to get this back in hand, not only the United States, but the West needs to be very clear, Europe as well, that this is intolerable, and the costs on those who perpetrate these kinds of criminal activities and wartime aggression will pay dearly.
All right. So with what he's losing, and he's losing a lot, to a kind of ragtag operation coming out of Ukraine, there's no way he wants to face NATO on a battleground. I mean, clearly they are not ready, right? My guy who I talk to every day, he has unexploded Russian ordnance in one of his cornfields. And we've seen a lot of those. We've seen various unexploded ordnance from this campaign. So he doesn't want to face us. And the no-fly zone would appear to me to be the easiest way that he wouldn't have to face us, because he'd only try that for a day or two, unless you think he's crazy enough to bring nukes to the table.
I think Vladimir Putin is determined to cause as much trouble as needs be to achieve his at least short-term objective, which is to destabilize the Ukrainian government. I think he is intent on that. He knows there's no turning back at this point. Vladimir Putin's never going to attend another G7 or G20 summit, right?
Right.
He knows that he has blood on his hands. He might have had some when the attack on Crimea came and the world forgot. I pray that it can't be the case that the world won't forget again. I can't imagine it. He can't imagine it either. So, Simon, I have to tell you, I think he's going to continue this aggression until the cost becomes so staggering that he has to find another solution. And I think he is likely to achieve at least the immediate objective, which was to defend what he did in Crimea, make sure he gets all of the south and east, and he puts something that looks like a government he can control in Ukraine. Whether that causes him to have to push further or to have to use even more destabilizing weapon systems, I think he is very determined, and we should not underestimate his determination.
Okay, the only thing I'm kind of surprised about in relation to what's going on in the world is that China has not moved on Taiwan while we are otherwise occupied, as it were. I thought that might have happened. You, of course, were just there, and you have called on the United States to formally recognize Taiwan. Let's talk to us about what they're feeling.
So the Taiwanese people are clearly concerned of precisely what you just described. They know Xi Jinping to be not only the possessor of military capabilities that are every bit Russian capabilities, but they know that he is equally ruthless with Vladimir Putin as well, and an intent in the same way that Putin is in regaining what he views as his historic rightful ownership over their space, the same way Putin fantasized about Ukraine being the rightful part of Russia. So they are very concerned about it. It's why it's incredibly important that the United States demonstrate that it is prepared to do everything that it has signed up for decades in terms of providing the Taiwanese with the weapon systems they need to defend their own nation. And we ought to, as part of that, recognize Taiwan is not part of China. No one who talks rationally about Taiwan thinks that it was ever part of China or ought to rightfully be so. We ought to not obfuscate that anymore. We ought to simply recognize it as a sovereign nation and then prepare Taiwan and the Taiwanese people to defend themselves from what Xi might do. That's how deterrence works. That's the model. It's not about trying to spur a war or motivate Xi Jinping to do something he wasn't going to do. It's simply, Simon, to demonstrate resolve and create deterrence. We did it for 4 years. It is possible to achieve. It simply takes leadership and resolve.
Right, and I've said repeatedly on this show, this isn't a Republican-Democrat thing. This isn't a left-right thing. This is a leadership thing. We've had leaders in the White House who were Democrats. That has happened. We just don't have one right now. I don't think any of this would have happened, by the way, without the appalling way we left Afghanistan. I just don't think any of this would have happened.
I think that's right. I think Putin saw that. Remember, Putin from Russian soil closes the Colonial Pipeline in the southeast part of the United States for a handful of days. You can't get gasoline in the United States. Mm-hmm. And he meets with President Biden. President Biden does nothing but wag the finger at him.
Yep.
So then talks about a minor incursion being okay.
Right.
Those aren't. That's not Democrat. That's not liberal. That's not conservative.
Nope.
That is malfeasance, right? Mm-hmm. That is throwing gasoline on Putin's objectives and saying, nope, this is something that you might well just get away from, and it is that's the failure of deterrence, right? It's the perception in the mind of your adversary that you have to manage, and the perception clearly in Putin's mind was that he could roll through Ukraine just in the way that he has. He's only been surprised by two things so far: the Ukrainian resistance and the ineptness of his own military.
Yeah,
I think he has not been surprised by the strength and resolve of the West. I pray that tomorrow or the next day he'll be surprised by that as well.
We're talking to former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo right now. He is in Iowa tomorrow. We're going to talk to him about that in a second. But you just said throwing gasoline on the fire. That's an expensive thing to do these days, Mr. Secretary. We've gone from your administration, under President Trump, the administration you were part of, where we achieved energy independence. Some people are confusing that with oil independence. That was never stated, but we were energy independent, to this ridiculous stuff where we're talking to Iran and Venezuela. It's just, I can't believe the words are coming out of my mouth, to be perfectly honest with you. If you could deal with that in 1 minute, that leaves us a couple of minutes to talk about why you're here in Iowa tomorrow.
Simon, it's unexplainable. Some folks say, Biden wants to say that this war caused these prices to go up. We know two things. One, the prices were going up already. Second, we put massive sanctions on Iran. We pulled a couple million barrels a day off the market, and price went down. It was because America led. We worked the diplomatic channels to ask the Saudis to provide to the South Koreans and Japanese and elsewhere the fuel that they needed. This administration jettisoned those ideas, made enemies of the Gulf states, closed down American capacity to provide energy for itself, and then this happens. And of course, just like the Germans, we were too dependent on the Russians. This is a tragic strategic error. I hope they get it back right, or not only will we see huge gasoline prices, but we will see home heating costs go up. The price of food coming from places like Kansas and Iowa is going to go up. If you're a farmer, you're going to pay more for fertilizer. These are hugely impactful to ordinary Americans and an enormous tragedy that did not have to be.
Right, and even some of Biden's friends in the media reported that the Saudis wouldn't take his call. It's unthinkable, but it happened. So there you go. All right, Mr. Secretary, you are in Iowa tomorrow. Why are you back here this time?
I'm looking forward to coming back. I'm going to go out and help some candidates be very successful in November of this year. I think all that we've been talking about so far demonstrates the need for a change of direction. I think the American people can see it. And I'm looking forward to coming out to Iowa and talking to them about the things that the Trump administration did and the things that good candidates, from district attorneys and school board members to those folks running for governor's races and House races, the good things that they will do if the good people of Iowa send them to Washington or to the Capitol there in Iowa. And I can't wait to be back in Iowa and get a chance to talk about what it is that truly matters, why it is that these virtues that our party has held so dear for so long are the right path for America.
Well, bring an extra sweater. I'm just saying, it's a little bit chilly right now.
I'm leaving Iowa and heading back. I'm heading back home to Kansas. I'll bring a sweater for both places.
There you go. It is always a pleasure to talk to you. Very, very briefly, I've got 30 seconds. Governor Reynolds announced her intention to be re-elected yesterday. She held a rally. What do you think of our governor?
I was with her not too terribly long ago. She was a fantastic governor. I thought she did an enormously fine job. responding to President Biden's State of the Union. She highlighted the stark differences in the way we think about the world and America and Americans. I pray that she'll be successful. I look forward to helping her be successful in her reelection as well.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, I guess I should say former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Always a pleasure when you come on this show. We really value your experience and your willingness to share it with me and indeed this audience all across the Midwest. Thank you very much. Have a safe trip here.
You have a wonderful evening. We'll see you all tomorrow.
There you go. And you have a wonderful evening too.